I am thrilled to have an extraordinary guest today named Doug Jorgensen, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Mysterious Innovations. He is part of the team behind a very uniquely named website called mysterious.wtf. And Doug is far from your average executive. He's a doctor, a coding whiz, and even a rock and roll medic with over 2 decades of experience shaking up the medical world. He's also the first osteopath in the US to earn a certified professional coder credential and has even patched up some rock stars and advised elite agencies such as the FBI and DEA. Doug, thank you so much for being here today. Where are you located today for this
Yeah.
call?
I'm in South Carolina, Darren, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I had the pleasure's all mine. Thank you for taking time out of your day. I think what everybody wants to know before we even jump into the technology part in your company is, are you able to name any rock stars or just celebrities that you have been able to patch up?
I can name groups, but it would be remiss of me to name individuals. That would
Okay.
violate many HIPAA rules. But no, I mean we've done group from Nine Inch Nails. We've done the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. I've done myriads of country country shows because we take care. When I was doing that work, we were taking care of both the roadies and the band members and their families when they were on tour together. But we've done huge names in rock and roll. Predominantly, it was these were people who were touring through Portland, Maine, Bangor, Maine, and some of the smaller theater areas because that's where I was practicing at the time.
Okay. Well, I love that you mentioned Trans-Siberian Orchestra. That's something that I have been to a couple of times. And for those of you that don't know what it is, they pretty much take Christmas music and turn it into epic rock. And when I say epic rock, I mean there's flames, there's lasers, there's
Oh,
people
it's an
flying from
incredible show.
ceilings. It
Yeah.
is.
So I was,
So,
it was funny you mentioned that show in particular. I was under the stage doing B12 shots while the concert was going on above me because it was winter time because it was a Christmas show and everyone was catching some virus that was roaming through the entire orchestra. So I think I almost did 25 B12 shots that night, just trying to keep people up and running. So
oh
it was pretty
wow.
funny. Yeah.
Well, so what are the common injuries specific to that group? Is it the flames they get burnt?
No, there were no pyrotechnical injuries.
Okay.
These were predominantly cold and flu type illnesses. You know, we really do a broad. It's basically primary care work that you're doing, but because I'm an osteopath, I also do manipulative medicine when I was practicing then. So I could do spinal manipulation, I could do musculoskeletal injections. Um, it was a very broad spectrum of groups that you would see because these were major tour venues. So you had not that we took care of these people necessarily, but there was Train, there were I mentioned Nine Inch Nails, there was several large country shows, Keith Urban, different bands like that would come through, and I worked very closely as one of the people that ran the venues, and I'm not a starstruck person typically. And so it was one of those things where we would go there, we would go backstage, and backstage isn't what everybody thinks it is. It's not what it used to be because now the bands get paid for their tours. Where in the crazy rock and rolls in the 70s and 80s, everyone hears all the stories. They were just there to promote albums and they weren't making any money on the tour. They were just there to beat the bush to get people to go buy their records. And now that the bands are the ones making the money, there I'm not gonna say there's not some partying and there isn't some craziness, and there are some crazy stories that I could talk with you about off camera. But they were they're predominantly there to do work, and if their shows are bad, it will affect their merch and their ticket sales at the next venue. So they really are very much on point when
Well, I'm looking forward to that talk because I'm sure that will be a whole nother thing. So, let's focus it now on to where you are today. So, can you share a little bit about your current role and how it
Sure.
connects to your bigger vision that you're looking for at Mysterious?
Absolutely. So, Mysterious Innovations has gone through a few different iterations in what we had initially started to do. We began actually in the NFT market until Sam Bankman-Fried did what he did. And we ended up getting out of that, and we were already had some data elements that we were working on. So the three partners, John Watson, Ben Matucci, and myself, we all were in this space of sales and marketing and consulting work for multiple decades, probably collectively we're at 50 or 60 years. And John Watson, who is the CEO, he is a ethical hacker, incredible programmer, and got his start doing a lot of very high-end work in the Air Force, working B-1, B-2 bombers and the interfaces with Boeing, which he wrote. And then he also did some very interesting programmatic work. He did some anti-drone technology. He has done a lot of database analytics. He had one of the largest, if not the largest and fastest real estate database in the world that he sold. And then he created the database we use now back in 2007. So we have a database of 330 million Americans, nearly 5,000 data points per person, as well as their device IDs that correlate. They are de-identified, and we do use the opt-out list so that if someone is on the opt-out list, we remove them. People often say, well, how did you get all of that data? And it's updated every 2 weeks. And it is updated every 2 weeks because when you go and use your frequent shopper, your gas discount card, or whatever other piece, when people sign the waiver that says, do you give us permission? And they just say, I want to buy whatever I'm buying. And they swipe through that quickly. Within that is the permission to sell their data. And they sell it to people like us. And then we can take that data and do a very high level analysis. So as an example, we had a venture group that wanted to raise capital for a project in the Pacific Northwest. So they needed people who were qualified investors. So they had to have a certain amount of income. They had to have a certain amount of money, and that they, in order for their net worth to be north of 7 figures. So we were able to identify very rapidly several thousand people that had incomes north of $500,000 a year and had over $1 million in savings based upon their internet data and what we could analyze with our database. And then we could give that data to our client so they could then legally reach out and be able to get potential people for investing in what they were doing. So it's also done more discreetly than that. So let's say we're marketing for a car dealership, and that car dealership finds people who are looking for a new truck and the features of that truck that are specific to their search. We can identify those people, their geographic locale, and then we can go and see what they are searching for. And we can begin to send messagings to their computer rather overtly, or to their phone rather overtly. And then once they leave the search and they're no longer looking for the car, maybe they're going to Starbucks, maybe they're going to Home Depot, maybe they're heading to Walmart. And that ad will just continue to follow them as part of the data that we have. And it becomes their decision over time to make the purchase. John had studied existential psychology as part of his college degree. And so psychology makes the decision your own. Once it becomes your own decision, you're more likely to move forward. Some people buy when they're happy. Some people buy when they're sad. And based upon what we see on the social media posts, you can market to those people at those times. So it's some people say it's a little creepy. I could tell you what kind of ketchup you like. But that's just, the data is out there. Obviously we use it ethically, but it's a really exciting place to be. And it's a very unique database, and it really has great impact for our clients.
Well, I hope the majority of the data that you get on people that like ketchup is the one with tomatoes in it. Straight chemicals, but you never know. So,
well, RFK Jr. is trying to make that happen. We'll see.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So when you talk about, tracking them all, something I've noticed in checkouts is that when you're filling out all the information, there's a checkbox that used to be like, it used to represent kind of like, I agree to do this purchase. And the text has changed to say, sign me up for all the spam, pretty much. So when you talk about, people are flying through those checkouts, is that where you're specifically saying
that is the language in
that?
Yeah, you can have that language sent to you before you sign it, but then you can't make the sale, because a lot of them will not even let you go through the purchase process, whether you're in a physical store location or whether you're buying on the web. And they're doing that because they're making money selling that data. Now, it's a trade-off because they're giving you a discount on whatever it is you're buying. So the question is that 5 or 10% off worth the fact that you are being analyzed, albeit in a private manner, because we're not using names. But if I know your cell phone, I know your financial information, I know your search indications, you can put that together pretty easily. States like California, regions of the world like Europe, little more challenging, little more regulatorily difficult, but we obviously engage with all of the laws to make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And the results really do speak for themselves. And we had our first started using the database piece during the RNC, DNC elements for a presidential election. And John was at a table discussing this with the two people who were the guest speakers, unbeknownst to him. And one was from the RNC and one was from the DNC. And then they got up and began speaking. And he had told them that he could do a database that could analyze how pundits were being received. And he, in real time, during a national election, was able to tell them what people thought of their specific responses in real time by looking at social media posts for the different folks. And we could identify whether they were Democrats, Libertarians, Republicans, Tea Party, et cetera, based upon their social media elements. So we could categorize the responses and we could get categorically excellent information in real time, how each group of the population who were in those different categories of Republican, Democrat, Tea Party, whatever group. And we could tell them this is how they're responding to your messaging. And this, if you want this vote, this is how you need to tweak that messaging. And again, that may be upsetting to people, but that's how data works.
That's probably upsetting to the people, but to the advertisers and marketers, that's a dream right there, right?
Yeah. No, so, it's really a lot of fun.
So it sounds like you have data for everything. So out of curiosity, what is the one, we'll call it, subsection of data that you have the least of? Because you have the politicians where they like to shop, cars. What would you say is the least area?
Well, we don't do names, and we specifically remove the names so that we're compliant with all federal standards for privacy. And it's at 5,000 data points per person. It's a pretty exhaustive list. I think the hardest thing, and the thing that you can't know, although we can know it pretty well, is certainty about the timing of the purchase. They will eventually buy if you're marketing to what they're needing, but I don't think we can definitively, we can give a ballpark based upon the historic elements of both the individual and the subset of the population that we are creating the marketing, but we can't necessarily know the exact timing of the purchase. The other piece that we do is we do geolocation, where let's say you are at a hotel or you're at a concert and they have an excess amount of merchandise, or they have some high-end massage therapy, or maybe an experience for the tourist that's visiting. We can use the database to identify people who can afford that experience or that merchandise, and we can send it to them because those people arrived at the show. They're now within our fence, and we can market directly to those people. So that's a very, very helpful marketing element. But we also can do that for competitors, so that if you have people who are attending a program with a competitor at, let's say it's a conference, and you want them attending your conference, we can go to the conference of the competitor, geo-fence the hotel area, and we can penetrate them with all of your data to tell them why they should be going with you and not with the people they're listening to.
That's incredible technology. So going from the company down to you, what does your typical day look like as the COO?
So I work closely with Ben and John to operationalize the work that we are doing. John is
and sorry to interrupt, but just really quick, for Ben and John, for our listeners, can you let them know what their roles are in the company?
So sure. So Ben is the Chief Marketing Officer, John is the Chief Executive Officer, and we founded the company collectively using our overall experience. So we will have a series of new potential clients, and then we'll have a punch list of what needs to get done for that client, because we do soup to nuts marketing. We have our own video production team, we have our own post-editing production, and then we have our consulting work that we do because we are entrepreneurs ourselves. We've all owned our own businesses for decades. So not only do we do the advertising and marketing, but we're going to go in and tell them, this is why you're not making sales. I can give you all the sales you want all day long, but if you have an impediment within your system, that's what they're there to do. And we are disruptive because we're not there to be yes people. We're not there to say, you're doing awesome, keep doing what you're doing, because you didn't hire us because things were going tremendously well. You hired us because you want to increase your sales and increase. And you maybe have a great business, but we want to bring that to the next level. So we're going to tell you things that maybe make you uncomfortable. We're going to tell you things that you may not want to hear, but they're things that need to be said. because with the work that I did federally, we also have a regulatory side that's related to this. And I just finished a podcast just now doing information works for both patients and providers, because the healthcare system in this country is broken on many levels. And so what we are trying to do is to get those same informatics from the data that we have out to people who are trying to make healthcare decisions, or in the middle of fighting with an insurance company, fighting with the hospital system to get the care they need for themselves or a loved one. And we are putting our efforts into helping them using my regulatory background. So my job is to take all of the different clients' work that we have, work with John and Ben so we can prioritize what needs to get done. And if we need to outsource some of the post-production work or some of the editing work, we do that. Our websites are very unique in how we set them up. They are specifically designed in order to get us to be highly visible and action oriented, so that when people show up to our client's website, there is a call to action to get them to move. And because of what we have done in the marketing piece, they are arriving typically ready to make a decision to buy. And that is really important. I used to hate marketing because I spent a fortune on it and I could never measure my return. We can measure the return with data, and people may not like what the data says, but data doesn't lie. And if you are thinking you're doing one thing and you have this group of clients, but the data says those are not your clients, we might be able to make that group come to you. But this is who we need to focus on if you want to drive sales right now.
That's great. What is your thought on the old statement where it says, 70% of all statistics could be falsified?
That's fair. That's very fair. And honestly, it's funny you say that. Excuse me. When we go in to look, like we'll be doing an introductory meeting, and we can go backdoor and take a look at the Google Analytics for the website that we're looking at. And oftentimes their current marketing person is giving them information about who's going to their site and look at the traffic I've increased for you. Well, they've increased traffic because someone clicked on your website, but they're staying there for under 15 seconds. That's not going to be very good for you. We can follow all of that click-through traffic, and with our analytics, we can actually go back and see from whence they came. How did they arrive to you? Were they ready from a decision-making perspective? And how do we get them to come back to make the close and to make the sale? And I'll give you an example just from our own piece. We had a client that we were hoping to work with. Really, it's a phenomenal opportunity. I don't think it's dead, but they just weren't ready at the time. And I was talking to Ben. I said, I'm surprised we haven't heard back from Nancy. And he goes, yeah, I am too. He said, but she opened our document and she only looked at it for 28 seconds. And I said, okay. And he said, so she didn't read it. So she didn't have a chance to really look at it. And then 2 weeks later, we said, we're not ready to do anything right now. We'll let you know. And so something may have happened. It could have been personal. It could have been professional. But the calls went well. I think this is a client that we can definitely help, but we know whether or not so if someone says, oh, I read the whole thing. I'm like, well, you didn't. And that's okay. But no now doesn't mean no never, but let's just talk about what's there. And people are surprised when you have that level of detail, and the sophistication of the digital analytics that are available are really, really helpful nowadays. And it's much, much deeper than people would even realize. These are powerful, powerful instruments. I mean, I think I heard the comment that these cell phones that we have here are greater technology than what we used for the Apollo 13 mission to the moon. And that's an astonishing statement. And the fact that they're getting faster and better is very interesting. And as artificial intelligence improves, which is another area that we are working on with our clients, that is really going to make a monstrous application change for how we use this type of marketing data, and for how we work within the construct of social media. Because if used ethically, it's a fantastic tool, but that can be dangerous as well. So we're very, very careful about how we work with, and people who we say no to is also that's very important to us also.
Well, I think that's a good segue into industry trends. So what are the major shifts that you're seeing in the digital marketing and data space right now?
Well, there are many people who believe that they're using very large data and the big data sets that are helping them. The problem is they're not updated frequently. So if you're going to be using big data outside of us, or claiming that people are using big data, ask them the frequency with which they're getting their updates. Artificial intelligence has made that much easier. But artificial intelligence is only as good as the query. If you don't ask good questions and if you don't ask highly specific questions, that level of specificity is going to be your response, because garbage in, garbage out. And and I think some of the other trends that we're starting to see, and one of the things we had initially discussed, was the regulatory risk in the digital space. Anyone who's using digital technology, and that's virtually everyone in healthcare now. It's virtually everyone who is in the legal profession, virtually everyone in retail. And there are overt threats. There are criminal operations that are taking advantage. I mean, the ransomwares are probably the largest. And I think that that is a really important piece that people are not necessarily paying attention to. And the FBI and the Federal Trade Commission, different groups are really working to try to get the cyber criminals out of the pocket. And scattered spider is probably the biggest one that people are afraid of right now. The feds have been looking at them for a long time, and they are causing insurance premiums and the cost of insurance to go up, because insurance wants to prevent losses. And if you don't have the proper protections in place, then you're going to have risk. And if you have risk, premiums are going to go up, lawsuits are going to happen. And that market is growing just crazy right now.
Go into that spider in more detail. Explain what it is,
Sure.
why
So
that's driving up.
Scattered Spider is a cyber criminal organization who has become infamous. FBI has a specific task force working on them. They're predominantly going after financial and healthcare and retail institutions in the UK, in the United States. They'd begun going after retail institutions in the United Kingdom, and they are operationalizing an ability to get into the system either by manipulating individuals, so a social access where they pretend to be customer service or IT support, or they've hacked into someone's phone and sent them a notification that they need to redo their password because there's been a potential data breach, even though they are the data breach. And then the person changes it and they do a keystroke with either a Trojan or a direct visualization. Sometimes they're coming in as IT support and they're putting like AnyDesk on the laptop and saying, let me help you fix your IT issue. And then they put a Trojan in that does keystroke monitoring, and then they're into the systems. So the biggest ones they've been doing are healthcare ransomware. They have broken into some law firms. There's a Johnson, not that it was necessarily them, but the Johnson Bell case, I believe it was like 10 years ago. So this has been going on, but it's ramping up and the numbers are ramping up. Some states like Florida last year passed a bill, now a law, that if you're making a modicum of effort that is standard, then you cannot be held liable in a civil lawsuit. And I think that's important. Florida has the second or third largest number of Medicare beneficiaries. So healthcare data being what it is, that is very, very risky as a state. And Florida being very pro-business is trying to make sure that people are protected. So what does that standard look like? Well, they have to use 256-bit encryption. And people are like, well, that's old. I've been using 256-bit encryption, what, 15 years or longer? I said, yeah, it's old, but it's about speed of access. So if you have 256-bit encryption, simply means that it's 2 to the 256th power. And so you have to eventually, and they will eventually get a computer system that can go fast enough to potentially get there, but then you're trying to stay ahead of that by making your protection system fast enough that it's changing the access and the passwords more rapidly than the other computer that's trying to get into the system. So it's a very good system. It's a very strong system. It's used by NSA. It's used by financial institutions. So it is the standard. And then are you updating the pieces? Because you could have a problem where you could get sued because the product that you purchased was not updated or had a glitch in it. And if you didn't update it, that's on you. If there's a glitch in it, that's on the product person. It could have been a service provider that you hired that was supposed to do the updates, or they only did 90% of the computers and the servers in your business. And then that 10% was left accessible, and that's an exposure. So when you're hiring people, because it used to be you just hired the local guy in town, unless you're a large corporation, you need to hire people and then ask them, I need a copy of your insurance rider. What are your coverage limitations? What are the potential gaps in those limitations? And do I need to get secondary or tertiary insurance or even get look at what the reinsurance options are, because that may be subrogated to another organization that, while they'll pay the claim, they're going to come after whoever was liable. And if that's you, they will come after you as well, even if you were the client.
Well, and that's something that's interesting too, because NIST, or the National Institute for Security and Technology, had released an article at some point earlier this year about not changing your passwords anymore.
Mm.
So it was interesting, you talking about the 256 encryption. So I'm curious at your take on that. Like, for everybody listening, like a Twitter version response, like what are the key things that you recommend to make sure that they're keeping their passwords, number one, difficult
Sure.
enough to not guess, but then also not get breached?
Well, this isn't an advertisement for NordVPN, but I'll tell you why I like them. They have a suite of services where you can actually use different IP addresses. I literally work out of different countries every day. It does mess up your Google feed sometimes, or whatever search engine you're using, simply because they will put it in the language of the country you're in. So I try to make sure they're English speaking countries so that it understands what I want. But I use their system. They have a complete password system where it will generate an alphanumeric and symbol based password that isn't something that you would come up with. Hard to hack, hard to remember, but the system will take you through, and it will take in your credit cards, your financial information, everything, and it's firewall behind their system, plus it's firewall behind your system. And then if you're using NordVPN on top of having the password protection, then you have multiple layers of protection. Is it perfect? No, but I think it is very customer friendly. It works on my phone, it works on my laptop, and it syncs the passwords, and it will create a challenging password for you. And I leave those in place. The passwords that I've created that are named after my dog or my kids, I get alerts all the time that those are on the internet. I'm like, well, yeah, well, no shit. Of course they are. I've been using them for years, but I'm not going to use that necessarily for my bank account, or I'm not going to use that for like a crypto wallet. That doesn't make sense. So people need to be concerned about biometrics. I mean, people think biometrics are very secure. Unfortunately, with AI and some of the digital elements, biometrics are not as secure as they used to be, whether it's a finger or it's facial recognition. Particularly now that facial recognition is being used in airports and other settings, you're a hack away from having your facial recognition software identified. So I think there are better ways than others, but using a password generator, I think, is critically important. Some people will not use them because they think someone is watching them. Everyone's being watched. Let's just be honest. Not necessarily by us in our database, but definitely by other folks in the government and internationally. So I would just say use the best system that you can afford, and make sure that you are backing up everything that you're doing repeatedly, so that it's the only protection that you have, because we are in a clearly digital space, and with the ability to walk by someone and collect the data on their cell phones, if you don't have good encryption and you don't have good password protection, you're inviting criminals. You just are. Whether you're at the airport, the mall, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
People can walk by you now and steal everything on your phone and have access to all of your finances. And
Yeah.
my daughter had a bank account open. I went to open up her first bank account for her, and she had a credit rating of 600 because some woman had taken her identification and stolen it, and opened up bank accounts, bought cars, bought houses. And I think she was 15. We were just getting her permit. And the banker said, "It says here that you owe money on 3 houses in Florida." I'm like, she's 15. Does it look like she owns 3 houses in Florida?
And then you have to go through all their red tape too.
You got it. You got it.
Well,
So,
it's funny you talk about that part about constantly being monitored, because I don't think people realize how much information is on their phones. And phones by default, the apps are communicating with each other, not only on the phone but back to their databases. But I'm pretty sure, and I don't remember the stat off the top of my head, but the average American's drive to work,
mhm.
I believe you cross 30 cameras that you were caught on just
Sure.
to get to work. So yeah, I mean, you're constantly being monitored. So with all this stuff that you've brought up, how are these trends affecting your growth strategy at Mysterious?
So we we have actually just got in our own large language model. We're not using any of the open AI pieces for our business development. We use them. We use Gemini. We use Google Docs. We use Gemini there. We will use ChatGPT sometimes for content creation for some of our internal pieces, and sometimes for clients, but usually not. But like we have one group that we're putting a large language model system in their facility so that none of their data is going into the open systems that are out there. And that strategy is specifically designed to prevent them from being in a hackable position, even though everyone says how safe they are. And it also keeps their information and our work with them proprietary. And so we will do that for each client that wants to begin to optimize the utilization of AI. There are a fair number of people, and a lot of them are the creative folks who are anti-AI. They believe that it is unethical, it's immoral to be using this as an artist to create content. Perhaps I could see their argument. I mean, I made my living playing music before I went to medical school. And I didn't write any of my own stuff, it was just covers, but I did meet enough people who have this indignant nature about that's my art, that's my signature on whatever it is I'm doing, whether it's performing arts or visual arts, what have you. And so I do understand that. But it is foolish to not think that this is going to be part of your future endeavors, because AI is here to stay. So either figure out how to use it and embrace it as part of the culture and the work that you're doing, or you're going to be ending up living in a commune by yourself, because there's no way that you are not going to be affected by it at some point. So that to me is the biggest part that we're doing growth-wise, is we're trying to embrace it with our clients, but advising not to go the end of working with the very large language models that are publicly open. Personally, I had a very small Ethereum operation for mining in Canada, and we were a really great guy. He was doing our programming, and he had set up most of the servers, and he was using open source coding because that was very common in that space. And it's a really great idea, because you come up with a set of code that works, you can share it with someone. Okay, great. Well, one of the cyber criminals put a Trojan in it, and we woke up one day and all of our Ethereum was gone, because he had used an open source model that allowed someone to break into our system, put in keystroke followers, and all the Ethereum was removed. So it's one of those things that you have to know what you're dealing with. And so we see that as an optimal growth strategy to be able to help them use AI while not jeopardizing both their proprietary information, our proprietary information, but allowing them to benefit from the system.
Yeah, and rug or being rugged or having the rug pulled out of you is very common in the crypto world.
It is.
Everybody's trying to get that money fast. So it's your story is common with many many people.
Yeah, it doesn't make it hurt any less. So I guess.
No, it doesn't. But misery loves company, I guess. So we just all get piled in that same thing. So let's talk about current state of Mysterious right now. So what's working really well for you lately?
Sure. So what we're really excited about is our ability to make video content that is able to make decisions for our clients, clients. You say it that way. The problem we run into, and what most of the time takes a little bit of doing, is getting them to understand that just because you can get video content or marketing material made inexpensively doesn't mean that we can get it to work, even if we put it in front of the people that you want to buy. So once we're able to get people to transform to what we're providing them, the amount of hits and the amount of contacts that they're getting go up dramatically, sometimes exponentially, because we are able to identify what they need to sell, what they can sell, and who is going to be buying. So I'll give you an example that medically. So we had a group that wanted to enhance what they were doing in their practice. And there are diagnostics that are disease-based, as they would be. And this internist was very, very excited because he wanted to primarily do cardiology. And I said, okay, that's fine. So we did an ICD analysis of his practice to identify what he had. And the majority of his practice had pulmonary conditions and or diabetes. So they had either COPD or they had asthma, and they had diabetes. And he had a subset of people, because if you have diabetes, you typically have cardiac disease, and you also can have cardiac disease and not have diabetes. And he said, no, I don't want to do pulmonary and diabetic testing. I want to do cardiology. I said, I understand that. I said, however, if you'll look at the data analysis here, we can make you an additional $30,000 to $40,000 a month for legitimate medical testing that these patients need. It will make their lives better. It will make you better money, and you'll be ahead of the curve, preventing them from having comorbidities and potentially even fatalities by getting ahead of this. And it's all covered by Medicare. It's covered by the insurance companies. So that type of analysis is helpful. Again, data doesn't lie, but getting the owner of the company to move forward, it can be hard. If the owner of the company is working with their spouse or a family member who is doing their marketing or their website development, that is a delicate dance. We have been fired on the way home from meetings that went great because as soon as we left, we got a phone call. Yeah, my wife says we can't do this because it was her cousin or her niece who was doing the database or doing their website, and that's fine. But businesses are either dying or growing; they're not static. And what got you to where you are probably isn't going to be what gets you to where you're going. And we'll tell people all the time, I don't think you're ready to work with us. We actually turn down more clients than we accept, and not because we're trying to be arrogant or elitist. They're not ready. And taking on a client who isn't ready to change, who isn't ready to have massive growth, is a bigger problem than taking on a client who is just going to be static. Because then you're now giving them, you're feeding them from a fire hose, and they don't know what to do with the clients. And then you're going to have people who are pissed off that that product or service is not performing as advertised. And that's even worse, because now you have to do reputation damage control. And that's even harder.
Well, and especially because they have to be able to handle, like you said, the hose that they're getting, right? They've got to be able to have either the infrastructure in place, the staffing, the standard operating procedures, but something has to be there to where it's like, hey, we just landed 5,000 new clients. It was like, we need to hire 20 staff and we don't have time to train you. So here, take this, ask us if you have questions.
Yeah. And if you're only getting 100 a month and now you got 5,000, like, well, awesome. But then you're like, holy shit, what am I going to do now?
Right.
I can't fix this.
That there's a very common, I guess, statement is what you would call it. But if you're making less than $1 million a year, then you have a sales front end issue. But once you start making over $1 million a year, it becomes the delivery, right? Your ability to fulfill becomes the issue. And so the more you make, that's one of those transitions where if you went from that 100 to 5,000, you've now switched to the other side. And most people, if you're not prepared for that switch, greatly underperform, and then it damages the reputation. The company's practically gone at that point.
And that's correct. Because then the company can't recover, because now you've got people who are pissed off, and you've got employees who are quitting because they're completely overwhelmed. So as entrepreneurs, in addition to sales and marketing people, we try to help people build to that level and say, these are the anticipated numbers. This is where we're heading. Are you prepared to do what needs to be done? So sometimes we find an outsourced group that can help them. Sometimes we anticipatorily say, this is what you're going to need. And I love family-owned businesses. I think they're great. But there does come a place and time, if you're going to grow, where the family members can go on the board, and then you need to get people who actually do the work. And saying no to people and saying, yeah, that's not going to work anymore is not just reasonable, it's necessary. And John is not a little, John's a lot blunt. Sometimes he really is. And he'll joke, although it's not a joke, but he has an issue with authority, and he does. But at the same time, it is a necessary conversation to be had. And he's not mean about it, but he's just very matter of fact. It's, people like, when I was practicing medicine, I was very kind, but if there's a bad event that's going to happen, or there's a bad outcome, you just got to tell people. You can say it in a nice way, I suppose, but there are people who just don't want to hear about the bad news. They just want to know that everything's going to be okay. And sometimes it's not. And when we run the data and find what we can do, some people aren't ready to make the change. And again, that's not right or wrong. It just is.
Yeah. And that's another very common saying, right? It's my mind's blanking. It's the one about, if you want it done right, to your expectations, you do it yourself. But if you want to go far, you have to do it with others, because most people, especially when they go into the entrepreneurship world, they do it all themselves. And what they really did is got a second job that requires even more effort for less pay. Correct. And you've really got to get out of that, you can call it employee mindset or gig mindset, to where you can't
the 9 to 5 is not what you're after, and you want this to grow. These are the things that are necessary. And we're excited to help people get to that point. It can be just crazy how quickly that will grow, and particularly with the ability to automate using artificial intelligence, you can do just massive amounts of change. And because of our ability to really dial in who you want for clients, we'll give you hundreds of thousands potentially pre-qualified clients very easily. It's just a matter of knowing what you want specifically and who your real buyers are. And sometimes just by analyzing the data that we've been provided, we can go in there. Because the other thing that we're able to do that's, I think, pretty unique is we buy our own ad space from all the social media platforms. And as ironic as it is, I'm only on LinkedIn. I do not do social media because I do not want all of my shit out there. I just don't. And I also just am not willing to be subject to all of the judgments and the wordings, and you'll like something and now someone sends you 100 hate messages. I just don't understand it. So anyway, I digress. The point I was trying to make is, because we do our own ad pieces, we can go through X, we can go into Facebook, we can go into even Google, and we can bypass their censorship, is what I would call it, when they're telling you what you can or cannot use for advertisements, and our ads will just go direct to the digital IDs that we need them to go to. And we're able to do that less expensively than if they're buying them in bulk, because of the quantities that we buy. And we're also able to do it without being subjected to the censorship models that are so prevalent in Facebook, in X, and the other social media platforms.
And can you drill down on that a little bit further? So what specifically are you doing to bypass that?
Well, because we're going directly to their device IDs, they're going to be getting this. When you do an ad, typically with a social media platform, you have to submit the ad to get it to get permission for it, or if they see the ad coming through kind of their general area, they're going to potentially put it under censorship and sanction it if they don't like it. So some of the areas that we are able to market to that other people cannot is tobacco, alcohol, cannabis, and the adult industry. So we're able to go around the norms legally by exploiting our ability of our database to gain access to those folks dependent upon what platforms they are on. And we can find their social media elements and then directly go to their cell phones, their TVs, their laptops, their iPads with those advertisements without having to go through or get permission from the social media components.
So you're not actually doing it through, like, so do the advertisements actually show up on Instagram and the other social medias, or is it much more of direct messages to them?
Both.
Oh, okay. That was really cool. So then that was all the great stuff of what's working well. What is the most frustrating or challenging obstacles you're dealing with at scale?
Egos are probably the nicest way that I can say it. And people are used to doing what they're used to doing. And there are the hardest thing to scale sometimes, at least in what I've seen, is the ability of people to get out of their own way. And like the guy I told you about who wanted to do the cardiology piece, or we had a car dealer who was convinced that he knew who the best people to market to would be for what he was trying to sell. And if I can help you sell 50 to 100 cars online and they just come into your CRM, or our CRM, because we have our own proprietary CRM that we use with our clients, that will give you the specificity that you need. But it requires you to make your salespeople check the CRM. It requires you to be open to selling to a market that you might not be open to. And it requires you to potentially change your business model for how you are doing or making sales outside of what you have been doing that got you to where you are. And that doesn't mean that wasn't massively successful, but you've hit a ceiling. And how do you do to get beyond that ceiling? And that's the hardest part. And the reason I say ego is oftentimes it is an owner, or it is someone on the ownership team who just thinks that they know better. And we're not there to argue with them. I'm not going to sit there and plead with you. Data doesn't lie. If this is the data that we're presenting, and I hate to say that over and over again, but if we have the data that's showing you and you want to have a subjective experience that is contrary to what we're showing you, that's fine. But if you're wanting to get to where you're trying to go, are we right 100% of the time? No. But data, because it doesn't lie, is right 90% of the time. And there will be some small variability. And I'd rather get an A minus, than a C on my exam as I followed the data and did what I was supposed to do. And um, throwing crap against the wall, hoping it works, is not a strategy.
Yeah.
And that makes me crazy. So that's why I say ego is probably our biggest and most frustrating impediment, because we can scale our technology, we can scale just about any strategy. And I would put our database up against any database, frankly, in the world for what it's capable of doing.
Well, and I think when it comes to data like that, I think that's what throws most people off. Because if you're talking about you don't do social media purposely, and it's very true, it's like the reason everybody sees the exact same videos just by different people is because that's what's working,
Mhm.
right? They're
That's
looking at
correct.
the data, or you're not willing to admit that that's what it takes to be not even viral, but just trendy work or trend worthy to
Yes.
where you're not even willing to do it. You're like, I'm not willing to throw spaghetti against the wall, literally, as a thing for that exact example,
Right.
just because it seems silly or I don't want to come across as not that professional, right?
Yeah. We want to be
There's like
laser
their own
focused.
standards.
You want to be laser focused in what you're doing, because people are inundated with information now. And,
Mm.
we were watching a movie the other night with my wife and my son, and the uh the ads come on, and I think it was on Hulu, and it was like blaringly loud, and we always mute them now. And she's like, "Why is that so loud?" I'm like, "Because they're trying to get your attention." I said, "They no longer can just give you a normal commercial. They no longer can give you a routine advertisement, because it will not attract you, and it will not, because you're on information overload on everything that you're getting, and you're just going to turn it off. So you have to find people who want what you have, and they're there, and we will help you find them."
Gotcha. Yeah, it goes back to those old car commercials where it's like buy, 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 really loud in your face compared to
You
everything
got it.
else.
You
So
got it.
for Mysterious, what are you as the visionary and COO, what are the key metrics and outcomes that you're most focused on moving right now for the company?
So we're looking at enterprise level relationships right now. We are actually doing software development for some very large auto dealership components. Well, it's an auto dealership marketing tool that we think is suboptimally using the data that they're receiving. So we have been asked and are getting an investment to expand our programmatic and database systems to give them greater specificity and to better target clients. We are also doing our own artificial intelligence work in the regulatory consulting world for physicians, and we're going to be using our database and our AI in order to enhance the appellate process for patients for denials and lack of coverage from insurance as part of the regulatory element. So those are going to be very large growth areas for us, because people don't understand how to fix certain systems. The majority of medical providers nowadays are employed. They do not understand the risk profile of being an employed doctor and what that could mean to them if, God forbid, there is an audit or something untoward happens. They'll be dropped like a hot potato, and they don't know how to protect themselves. And in the marketing space, we want to use AI and our large language models in order to help our clients automate what they're doing. I mean, the notion that jobs are going to disappear is true. It's already happening. And we're not looking to replace people per se, but if you're going to grow, you don't have to hire as many people if the AI is set up the way it's supposed to be, and we can help you identify what those needs are going to be.
I think that's fair. Yeah. I mean, the big fear is replacing jobs, and definitely is happening with lower skilled items first that are repetitive, but it can
Yes.
definitely speed up everybody. And so that actually brings up an interesting point. It's like when it comes to, we'll just call it scheduling, is it
Mhm.
better to just send them a link and let them click it? Or do you think that it's better to set up automation and AI or something that actually converses in the platform that they're already communicating with you on?
I think it's a combination. People want real-time answers. We've become a McDonald's drive-through society for just about everything, so that people expect 24/7 service. So I think whether it's a bot, whether it's somebody in India that's managing it on the other end, so they're up in the middle of the night when we're not, or their day, our middle of the night, those are necessary. And I think that you also have to have the links. You can set up an actual appointment for someone who's at the company for people who want to just get a hold of that person and make a sale. I think that's critically important.
All right. So with the automobile and health initiatives you're talking about, when you look at Mysterious, looking into the future, where are you wanting Mysterious to be 6, 12 months from now?
So we want to, 6, 12 months from now, we want to actually be helping the smaller and medium-sized dealerships get the volume that they need and help them grow and be successful. The large dealerships don't necessarily need help, but the smaller ones do. Um, and we want to give them that ability. In the healthcare industry, we want to be able to help providers and the industry in general identify methods and follow regulatory policy in order to enhance access for patients to healthcare and to protect providers from unnecessary regulatory scrutiny. And we also will be expanding into Europe and the Middle East with a lot of the work that we're doing, because part of our regulatory piece is doing medical research and optimizing that in other first world countries like Turkey, and some of those other spaces. Because some of my personal interests are cannabis medicine for research to identify what it does, and we're using our database and our technology in order to both do the research and enhance the analyses that are being done, so that we can get some real time answers. And we've been asked to do research in vitamins, healthcare products, neurodiagnostic tools, as well as some other, I think, very, very fascinating areas.
So when you start targeting those two market segments, what is going to be the biggest wall to get over to really break into,
Well,
the small
Europe,
dealerships?
Europe, and the small dealerships and such.
Well,
I think
just each of the verticals you mentioned.
sure. So in the small dealerships and medium dealerships, it's merely getting them to move out of the models that they're used to. Those are people that need to get out of their own way. If you want to grow and you want to get bigger, and you want to make more money, which means more sales, then you have to change traditionally how you're doing. It's the same 24 hours that everybody else has. So what are you going to do to make that change? And we're going to do that by helping make internet sales, because people are buying cars on the internet. I mean, when people first came out with Carvana, I think people made fun of them. And now it's normal. You can buy cars on the internet. We had a group that we worked with in Tennessee years ago. We were able to increase over cars north of $100,000 each, and we raised his productivity by 500 to 600%. So he was making, probably one or two of those a month, and we got him up to 10 to 15 of those every month. So that's a good ROI for the work. And if you are in a dealership that wants to grow and you're willing to make some changes to how you're doing what you're doing, we can help you sell more cars, and we can help you get more work, because dealerships primarily make their money on service, but you can make your money on sales, but that's a pure volume game. And so what you have is what they're going to need is to get the patients, get the buyer in who wants that particular vehicle. And they don't necessarily care if you're in Seattle, Washington, and the car's in Tampa, they'll put it on a truck. That's just part of the sale price. But you have to be able to have those two people meet, because the guy in Seattle isn't going to know the car's for sale in Tampa unless it's being marketed to him. And that's the only way that they're going to know that it's there. In the medical industry, we're actually beginning to work with medical societies a bit more. I've written dozens of articles and academic chapters, and I've been on faculty at several medical schools over the years. So we're working to get back into that sector, into the lecture circuits, and helping. But that too has changed. Excuse me. Even in the medical industry, they've limited the number of in-house seats because they make more money having doctors attend online, which everybody discovered during COVID. Because if you're having to rent out a whole medical facility for 1,000 doctors, that costs money, because you're renting the facility, you have to feed them all, you have to around there. But if you say we're only going to allow 100 people on site and 800 people attend who are remote, even if you cut that remote fee in half, you're making a ton more money, because your local expenses were cut by 90%. So
Yes.
It's a really great space. And we can market directly to all of those people for the different sponsors and for the organization, because we can do the geofencing of the 100 people that are on site, and we can market directly to the people who are attending online, because we'll have their IP addresses and we can go right to them. I don't mean that to sound creepy.
No, I'm sure it probably will with some, and I think that, but again, if you do find it creepy, you probably need to take a step back and realize everything you do is tracked.
What's out there? Yeah.
A very common joke is, I tell, or they ask me why I'm whispering. I was like, well, I'm afraid everybody's, I'm afraid everybody's listening. And so they'll laugh, I'll laugh, my phone will laugh, Alexa will laugh, and Siri will laugh. right? Because you're constantly
Well,
being monitored everywhere you are.
I don't remember which Snowden movie it was, but when he came into they came into the hotel room to talk to him, and he put all their phones in the microwave, and they're like, "What is wrong with you?" He goes, "You don't understand."
Yes. That's very true. And that's why the whole cybersecurity area and even medical, right? It was like the level of security on that has got to be so high, especially with all the attackers.
It
So
does.
going back to Mysterious, if you had a magic wand and could
Mhm.
fix, the one thing in your business that's holding you back right now, what would that be?
Uh, Time travel, if I could do it. Only because what we're doing, I'm very happy with, but and I don't I'm cautious when I say this, particularly having my kids are youngest one's almost out of the house, the other two are. 'Cause I don't want to wish away years, but I would like us to be programmatically where we will be in 5 years, and I'm hoping that with some of the artificial intelligence and just by working and hiring more programmers, that we can get to that point so that we can develop some of the platforms that are in the planning stages right now. And I wish we had those right now because there's some incredible things that we're making that I didn't even get into today because I can't just yet because of the proprietary nature. And
Sure.
if I had 5 years from now that I could bring here, that to me would be what I would request because I'm happy with what we're doing. I'm happy with how we're doing it, but the speed of getting it done is frustrating to me.
Is that something that you're focused on, the continued growth in cash flow as an example, or like as an example
It's
for the speed, is it something to where it's convincing the board almost of, investing heavily, keeping profits low for a couple of years so you can take that five and pull it up to two, or
We have investors who want to do it. It's more programmatic timing and doing the testing. Even if you want to get something done quickly, and this is one of the limitations of artificial intelligence, is that you have to still do the trial and error elements that need to be done to get to where you're wanting to go. But what AI will allow you to do is all of them simultaneously, and then it will accumulate the data and then give you the analysis outcome about what will work. Right now, because AI is still not working exactly the way we want, and just because of the magnitude of power and computing that would be necessary, we're not quite there yet. That's why they're saying in 10 years, we will have the medical care that would have been given in 2035, or excuse
right?
me, 2135 in 2035, because we will have been able to combine that. But you still have to do all of the trial and error elements. And that's what we're in the middle of trying to figure out right now is how can we do that rapidly so that we can build where we're going? Because that has to do partly with cryptography. Part of what we're doing also has to do with the rise and the utilization of cryptocurrency for ourselves and for our clients, and has to do with the securitization of those elements as we're growing them.
So do you think this is an industry-wide issue or just something more specific and unique to your business?
Well, I think industry wide, it's a struggle of AI. Do we have enough power? Do we have enough computing power? And when I say power, do we have enough electrical power to support it? I mean, there are places that are talking about putting in nuclear facilities just to support the AI computing that's going to be necessary to do what's going on. And nuclear is the safest form of energy that we have, despite people being antagonistic about it. The only errors we had, whether it's Chernobyl or 3 Mile Island, were human generated, despite people not wanting to read a book and figure that out on their own. But the really important piece in my mind is all of the AI systems and all of the advances that are there are about to take off. I mean, it's going to be a vertical climb, and I don't think people even understand what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. And I say that excitedly. I know there are the doomsday preppers that are concerned the robots are going to take us over, and we're going to have real life total recall. Maybe, but I think that that's less likely, and that the promise of what's happening is going to be just astonishing to be alive as this is happening. And all of us who are in this space, but even the very large ones, whether you're Zuckerberg or you're Bill Gates, as you're trying to get your arms around it, you are struggling with it at scale, the same issues of power, computation, and making sure that the system is going to work as it moves forward. Because those, I think Microsoft, I've heard someone once say they're famous for releasing something that's 80% functional and then letting their users figure out what needs to be fixed. And there's an adage in medicine, and it's also in a lot of growth strategies in general. The enemy of good is perfect. So when is it good enough to launch and say, let's see what happens? And I don't think that's wrong. It's just, and that's something we're struggling with because that's not how the three of us, as the owners of the company and the founders, that's not how we operate personally. But we're having to do some of that as we grow, and that's hard because when you release something that's a representation of you, and this is where also where I think our clients struggle with growth. If what is coming out is not exactly how you would want it to be presented and not how you would want to be seen, that's hard to let go of. And I think that's where a lot of small businesses and medium-sized businesses struggle because they have to be understanding that the enemy of good is perfect applies to just about everything in their growth strategy. And
Yep.
good enough is good enough. And if there's something that needs to be tweaked, then let's tweak it, but let's stop kicking the can down the road and get going.
Yeah, because perfect rarely actually releases, so it never sees the light of day.
No,
Because
not
and
only does it
plus,
not,
most of the time when it goes out, it's not what they wanted anyway. So it
no,
ended up
because even
being
if
good
you
at
think
that.
it's perfect, something is screwed up inside it. I promise you.
Yeah. Well, to the point of Total Recall, good movie, good reference for sure. But I that people always ask me, is like, why do you keep saying thank you? Like, I'm very polite to all the AI, and they're like, that
Yes.
uses your tokens. I'm like, well, when it does take over the world, it was like I'd like to at least remember that
He's
this
a
is
good
one guy
guy.
that was fairly friendly with them.
That's funny.
Because you never know. So
That's
so
funny.
we're kind of getting to the end of this. So are there any last words that you want to put out there for our listeners?
Um, I don't think so. I mean, I would embrace the AI that's there. I would definitely proceed with caution and be suspect of what you are doing on your internet, your web searches that are being done in private browsing or not private. And as your mother used to say, don't do something in private you don't want people to see you doing in public, because there's nothing that's private any longer anywhere.
That's true. And definitely don't put it on social media because
God
that
no.
just makes it even easier.
Yeah, God no.
All right.
That's a
Well,
whole
Doug,
nother conversation.
yes, it is. Maybe for another one of these. But
Sure.
Doug, it's been such an insightful conversation. I know our listeners and myself really appreciate hearing about the journey, all the bold work that you're doing at Mysterious, and also your perspective on where the industry is heading. So for all of you that are tuning in, make sure to check out Doug's work. You can go see him at mysterious.wtf. No, that is not a typo. It's truly fascinating how they're combining that creativity, data, and technology to reshape digital marketing. So, Doug, thanks again for sharing your time with us today. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Darren, thank you. It's a pleasure being here. Take care.
Hey there, it's Darren from The Digital Shift. I wanted to take a moment to thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. If you haven't already, make sure to check out the links in the description to learn even more information of everything we went over today. But if you enjoyed this podcast, then you are absolutely going to love this one. And if you're looking to look deeper into the technology that we go over in these videos, then go ahead and check out this one here. Regardless of which one you pick, you're going to walk away with something new. As always, I'll talk to you in the next one and keep being awesome.